Good evening, everybody. As Carlos explained, my name is Zahra. I'm with the Council on American Islamic Relations, and I, like Nina, want to thank everyone for coming out. I think it's a really impressive turnout. I was surprised when I walked in to see how many people were in here. And so what I want to talk to you really briefly about is, what do you do when the FBI knocks on your door? I'm going to go at this from a baseline, assuming that we're all sort of starting at some level. And one of the things I want to point out about the raids that happened in Chicago and Minnesota is that the people that were sort of targeted or victimized in those raids were very smart. The first things they did were they lawyered up. And they sort of knew to remain silent. And that's a great thing, and I think it's one of the things that a lot of times people overlook or we take for granted. Okay, can you hear me in the back now? Okay, so I'll try to project more, I'm sorry. So we take for granted, what do we do when the FBI knocks on our door? And so often we think it's not going to happen to us. It's either an Arab thing or a Muslim thing or a drug dealer's thing or a terrorist thing or something that's happening in Chicago and Minnesota, and we don't talk about it. And so a lot of what KYR does in partnership with other organizations is that we present to different community groups because, like I said, we take this for granted. I had a conversation with my mom a couple of months ago about how important it was that she knew what to do if the FBI knocked on her door, and she thought I was being redundant and repetitive. And surprisingly, the FBI knocked on her door 2 months later. And so she called me and she said, did I do it right? And she did. And it was a very exciting moment for me. And I share that with you because I think, even if you know what to do, share it with your friends and family after you leave this presentation. So 2 things. I always remind people, no matter what you do, you have the right to remain silent and the right to an attorney. So whether it's a heavy raid and they're in your home for 12 hours, or it's at an airport, or it's at work, or they slip the business card under your windshield wiper, whatever it is, you always have those 2 rights. The other thing to keep in mind is that any interaction with the FBI, short of an arrest warrant, right, or a search warrant, really anything, is voluntary. And so you control that relationship as a taxpayer, as someone who's living in this country, and as someone who, again, hasn't been served with an arrest warrant. You control that relationship. So they knock on your door and you're thinking, well, what do I do now? One of the first things that we tell people is, if you open the door and the FBI is at your door, step outside and close the door behind you. So the only way they're coming into your house is with a search warrant or with your consent, essentially, right? They can come in if there's a domestic dispute, but that's another complicated situation. But if they're at your door, open the door, step outside, close the door behind you. You don't want to let them into your home, because if you do let them into your home, anything they see is essentially fair game. So once you've stepped outside, you're having a conversation with them and you're thinking, well, what do I say now? I would urge you to say nothing. Is identify yourself and ask for a business card. This is really important because what we see for a lot of individuals is that you're nervous and you forget to ask for that business card. We had a client call last week who said, I know his name was Chris, and that's all I know. And I thought, great, well, how am I going to find this agent, right? Like, he could be anyone. And there have been stories across the country of different individuals or foreign agencies and, related interest groups pretending to be FBI agents, and that's problematic. So you always want to get the business card, because that's how you prove they were there. That's how the attorney tracks them down. So, hi, and I'll use Lily because she's in the first row and I know her and I don't want to subject anyone else to this. But so they say, are you Lily? And she says, yes, what can I do for you? And they say, well, I'm agent so-and-so and I'm with, such and such agency. At this point, Lily should say, well, do you have a business card? So she gets that business card. And at that point, she should say, thank you, I'll have my lawyer call you. And that's really where the conversation should end. And a lot of times people get into this like, well, will it be held against me if I say I want to involve a lawyer, or if I say I don't want to talk to them? And the 2 things that can't be held against you are asserting that right to remain silent and the right to an attorney. Anything else you say can and will be used against you. It has been used against people. I mean, if you look at the case that Nina talked about, they're dredging up pictures of girlfriends from decades ago. Like, why does that matter, right? And so any conversation, anything you share with an agent is on the record, and people should be cautious of that. So thank you, I'll have my attorney call you. And in a lot of instances, and we see this actually a lot in the Bay Area even, is at this point, the agent will try to talk you out of it. They'll say, you're not in trouble, we just want to get to know you, we just want to, ask you a few questions. No need to complicate it by involving an attorney. And this is where it's really important for people to know what to do, because if at this point you're not insisting, like, you need to insist. So it's not just I have the right to remain silent, I have the right to an attorney. It's I'm going to insist on my right to an attorney. I don't want to have this conversation with you, because they'll try to talk you out of it. And a lot of people sort of go for this, and one question will lead to another question, then all of a sudden you're in a 30-minute conversation. All of a sudden you're having the conversation in their car or at a coffee shop or somewhere where you're not necessarily, your guard isn't up. So you call the attorney, and there's so many attorneys in this room that do public service work. I'm not going to go through it, but there's, like, I see Julia right there from the ACLU. I know you can call her, you can call us at KYR, you can call Nina, you can call so many of us, and we do it for free. I mean, the National Lawyers Guild does this, right? And so call an attorney, and what does an attorney do, and why is that important? Well, a couple of things. We tell people who ask, well, why shouldn't I engage the FBI? If I have nothing to hide, why shouldn't I talk to them, right? Like, it should be really basic. I'm not a criminal, so I should just talk to them. I should just make it easy and let them go on their way. Well, a couple of things. One, they know more about you than you know about them. So all you know is their name and the agency they're with. They know where you live, they know your travel records, they probably know who you've been donating to. And so there's a power balance. It's definitely tipped against you. The second thing is that they're allowed to lie to people in the course of an investigation. And that's really critical, is that a lot of people don't realize that. They think, well, I'm having an open, honest conversation with a federal agent. What's to lose? The agent can lie to you, and often does. In a lot of cases, we've seen agents lying to people in the course of an investigation, often to get them to provide information, right? So I'll tell Lily about a party that I know about and some people that I know about, and Lily's thinking, what is he talking about? But because I'm having this exchange with her, I'm still getting more and more information from Lily. It doesn't work both ways. Lily is not allowed to lie to me, and a lot of people that are being arrested these days, particularly within the Amemsa communities or the Arab and Muslim communities, are not being charged with terrorism. They're being charged with things like lying to federal agents. The other thing to keep in mind is that it is really important to just have a buffer there with you, like an intervener, right? So when the questions cross First Amendment lines, so when they go from, can you tell me about this specific individual, to can you tell me about your entire community, can you tell me about your entire organization, and that line crosses, it's really important to have a buffer there. And I illustrate that importance by telling people that I'm an attorney and I would have an attorney with me if I were being questioned by the FBI. So what does an attorney do? Like, why get involved? One of the reason I pointed out that there's public interest attorneys in the room is because one of the things we hear from a lot of people who are in these situations is, I work at a nonprofit, I'm struggling to pay my rent, I don't have money for an attorney. And so it's really important that finances not be an obstacle to getting that legal aid. So Lily calls me, she says, hey Zahra, I was visited by the FBI, can you find me an attorney that will represent you? And I'll say, I'll represent you or someone else will. And she says, okay, so here's the business card of the individual. And this is why it's important, because this is how she's going to tell me who to follow up with. And so I call the FBI agent and I say, my name is Zahra, I'm representing Lily Haskell. It's my understanding that you visited her on such and such date, and what do you want with her? And so the great thing here is that it does a couple of things. If you have a professional, well-rounded, ethical FBI agent, he'll stop contacting Lily directly. There are still a handful of cases where he will go back to Lily directly. But in most cases, we'll see that they will cooperate and sort of follow the protocol of going through the attorney. So one, it ends direct contact with her. She doesn't have to worry about them showing up at her home or knocking on her neighbor's door looking for her. The second thing it does is when I ask, well, what do you want from her? They're going to tell me, or they should tell me, what do they want from Lily? And at this point, I can then go back to Lily and sort of act as a conduit, right, as a middle person, and we can look at the questions and see, well, what do they want from her? Do they want something that is there something that she can help them with? Maybe there is. Like, maybe she knows something that is of critical national security issues. In most cases, she won't. But, maybe she does, and maybe there's something she wants to turn over. And either way, she negotiates the circumstances of turning over that information, right, because she's working through the intermediary. But remember, going back to the fact that this meeting is voluntary, that also means she sets the time and day for the meeting. She sets the location. She sets the parameters of the meeting through her attorney so that she is in control and not them. And that's really important, because the most frightening thing that we see happening is when an individual goes into FBI offices by themselves. Like, you could go in not knowing what to expect or who to meet with. You go in with one agent, you're meeting with another agent, you think you're having a 30-minute meeting, it becomes a 4-hour meeting. And so it's really important to sort of set the parameters and really control that relationship. But the other thing that we see in the majority of cases, in the majority of sort of low-level FBI interest cases, is that once Lily involves her attorney, the FBI will back off. And more than 50% of cases, we see this, is that I'll call and I'll say, well, I'm representing Lily, what do you want from her? And they will essentially say, never mind. Or, it wasn't really that big of a deal, we just wanted to talk to her, right? At which point, Lily sort of knows she's off the hook, because there isn't any critical information about her that she needs to worry about, or there isn't some, like, crazy situation that she has to handle. She knows that they just wanted to be her friend, right? And that's a whole other conversation. But see, and it's easier for her then to say, I'm not really interested. But like I said, in most cases, it will end there, and it won't translate into a meeting. But a lot of people, think, well, if I just have this one meeting, will it go away? Will it be easier? And in the majority of cases, clearly these aren't absolute or scientific rules, but in the majority of cases, what we do see is that where an individual engages with the FBI without representation and without asserting their rights, that engagement continues. And so it doesn't become that one meeting, it's a second meeting and a third meeting. And all of a sudden they're just calling Lily on a Saturday to have coffee. or to check in on her and see how her Ramadan is going, or how her community activism is going. And it sort of like builds this like really hostile, coercive relationship where she's continually picking up the phone, because who doesn't pick up the phone when the FBI calls? And at the same time, she wants to get out of it. And so if there's two things that you take away from what I said, I urge you to, you have the right to remain silent, and you have the right to an attorney, and you should assert those rights. But not only that, you should tell people around you, because as activists, as people who are on the ground in the community, it's always amazing to me to see how many people this can touch. I mean, a lot of times we'll do a presentation like this, and it'll be a lengthier presentation, and weeks later we'll get a call from a relative of someone who was at a presentation because they got the message. And so keep those two things in mind. Thank you.